Yes, Professor Bwisa says that Africa is poor because of passing over opportunities repeatedly. Yes, this is Professor Bwisa, Professor of Entrepreneurship, making that claim. Bwisa thinks that in Africa, we are all the time passing over opportunities repeatedly because governments lack entrepreneurship policies to cultivate entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is a process through which individuals identify innovative opportunities, allocate resources, and create value. This creation of value is often through the identification of unmet needs or through the identification of opportunities for change. But then what's a policy? We are claiming that there's no entrepreneurship policy. Simply stated, a policy is a guideline or a plan that directs action. Do we have, therefore, a plan to direct entrepreneurship actions? Bwisa thinks, no, we don't have it in Africa. In Africa, we have mistaken the small and medium enterprise, or the SME policy, to be an entrepreneurship policy. An entrepreneurship policy, according to a great source, includes measures that are taken to stimulate entrepreneurship aimed at the pre-startup, startup, and early post-startup phases of any business. Entrepreneurship policy is designed and delivered to address the areas of motivation, opportunity, and skills. And the objective is to encourage more people to consider entrepreneurship or to move to the nascent stage and proceed into startup and early phases of a business. On the other hand, what we observe in Africa is what we call small and medium enterprise policy. These are measures targeted at supporting the already existing population of enterprises and virtually encompasses all the support measures designed to promote the viability of the existing SMEs. Let's try to differentiate them, the entrepreneurship policy, SME policy. The overriding objective of entrepreneurship policy is to influence greater supply of entrepreneurs, whereas the overriding objective of SME policy is to strengthen existing businesses. Look at the difference. Entrepreneurship goes to the supply, increase of entrepreneurs. SME, strengthening of existing businesses. Look at the scope. Entrepreneurship focuses on people, on entrepreneurs, on individuals. But the SME policy focuses on firms. So whereas entrepreneurship policy is animate, SME is inanimate. How about support emphasis? Entrepreneurship policy emphasizes the progressive people needs from one stage to the next, from awareness to pre-startup to post-startup. But the SME policy emphasizes the needs of already established firms that have already acquired sufficient capacity. How about the tools? Entrepreneurship policy uses soft policy measures such as mentoring, advice, and entrepreneurship promotion. But SME policy uses hard policy instruments such as financial support, grants, venture capital, etc., etc. How about implementation? Entrepreneurship policy includes a number of players in the makeup of its support infrastructure, such as educators, the media, and government agencies. But the SME policy directly implemented through a constricted set of key players, such as economic development agencies and financial intermediaries. Therefore, strictly speaking, there is a difference between entrepreneurship policy and SME policy. Well, both of them are directed at increasing the wealth of the nation, but the emphasis is different. Any business has a pre-startup stage, a startup stage, and a post-startup stage. We are saying that the pre-startup stage is actually the awareness phase. Make people get aware of entrepreneurship. Then, as you move to the business startup stage, you are now moving from the awareness stage, people are aware, and then you create nascent phase. People are now nursing the urge to become entrepreneurs, the nascent phase, nascent entrepreneurs. And then as we come into the business startup stage proper, then we have now what we call the startup phase. And then when we have started up, post-startup stage, now we have the post-startup phase. And when a business has started, it needs maintenance. And normally up to, let's say, 3.5 years, 42 months. So you see, this is generally the model of a business startup process. You can see this arrow is the timeline. It starts far and continues because now let's now fix in the entrepreneurship and the SME policies. That is the entrepreneurship policy. It starts well before the startup stage. We call this E-ship or entrepreneurship policy, and this policy focuses on the person, creating awareness among the people, among the populace. We are doing this by encouraging the supply of potential entrepreneurs, by stimulating technological developments, by developing entrepreneurial resources, venture capital, business information, entrepreneurship education in the schools, by inculcating entrepreneurial values in national culture. That is ideally what entrepreneurship policy focuses on. So entrepreneurship policy ends at a little of the time, a few months after the startup. And there is where the SME policy now takes over. The SME policy concentrates on stimulating of business growth, the business that has already started, business growth, sustaining of corporate entrepreneurial culture, no longer the individual, but the firm and the corporate body, focuses on sustaining the business. So the intersection of entrepreneurship policy and SME policy is now birth, supporting the business birth and survival. So this is the model that differentiates the entrepreneurship policy and SME policy. The key differences are that entrepreneurship policy starts well before the business starts up. The SME policy focuses on that startup. 2, entrepreneurship policy focuses on the person, creating an individual, an entrepreneurial person. SME focuses on the firm, just like it's called small and the medium enterprise policy. Let's look at it again. Let's look at from the pre-startup period, the startup period, and the post-startup period. That is our entrepreneurship policy, focusing on the person. We are saying this policy should be aimed at promotion of entrepreneurship culture among the people, reduction of barriers to entry into business, promotion of entrepreneurship in schools, not just universities, but indeed even in primary schools, provision of startup and seed capital. It targets group strategies, for example, the underrepresented, the women, the youth. This is what entrepreneurship policy does. And therefore, we can see that activities and policies that are directed towards creating entrepreneurship awareness, encouraging the populace to consider entrepreneurship, motivating people to move from the nascent stage, wanting to go into entrepreneurship, to actually go into entrepreneurship. So helping people to enter to entry stage. Then comes the SME policy. We have already seen the SME policy is focusing on export market incentives so that the business can grow. It is focusing on how to assist the businesses to expand. It is focusing on reducing the barriers to growth, provision of business development services, business expansion. So you can see, in effect, therefore, SME policy waits until a business has started. But entrepreneurship policy promotes, encourages people to start. Same aim, but different focus. And that's what we're saying now, that the intersection becomes provision of business startup support, e.g. incubation, startup portals, etc., etc. So, what are we therefore saying? That African countries have concentrated on the SME policies. They have waited until people start businesses, and it is unlikely that those people who are starting businesses are actually entrepreneurs. We shall be talking about the difference between a business person and an entrepreneur in our next clip. So, we can see intersection, scope, differences, and similarities. So here is how we can start building entrepreneurship on our continent, Africa. It is a process. First, we need to influence an entrepreneurial culture. And then we need to create nascent entrepreneurs, people, youth, students wanting to go into entrepreneurship, wanting to be employers and not employees. Even when they are at school, knowing that they can start business rather than be employed, and then converting those people wishing to start business into entrepreneurs. Those are the 3 key steps that we can do to encourage entrepreneurship on our continent. It is a process. It is a sustained progression, an entrepreneurship development process. So, stage 1, we need to motivate. Motivate the populace. Motivate students. Motivate pupils even in primary school to want to be entrepreneurs. Step 2, now we give them the skills. And these skills, education and entrepreneurship education must start even in pre-primary. And lastly, stage 3, now we empower. We enable them to go into business. So, motivate them, make people want entrepreneurship, then give them the entrepreneurship skills. When they have skills, empower them now to really enter into entrepreneurship. So, how do we influence the populace? We are doing it at especially pre and school kids. We make them be creative. We teach them creativity and innovation. We can do this through social value systems. Parents can do that. Mosques, churches. We want to influence everybody to want to go into entrepreneurship. And we are saying particularly the pre and school kids, let them be creative. We teach creatively, we teach them creativity, and that will start making them now want. Policies towards that are what we need for entrepreneurship. Having done that, we now make populace, especially the youth, now strongly want self-employment. Again, through the education system. So that when they are in school, they are dreaming of starting their own business. Let them not say, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. Let them say, when I grow up, I want to build a hospital. Not, when I grow up, I want to be an engineer. But when I grow up, I want to start my own garage. And lastly, we now help them, particularly the youth, to enter into sustainable self-employment through institutional support. We must have now the laws, regulations to support that. Of course, we have them for SMEs, but the SMEs left out the 2 stages that we've talked about. So, this is Professor Bwisa again. We want Africa. We want to live inside Africa that is prosperous, inside Africa that is entrepreneurial. We can only do this with proper entrepreneurship policies. Let us add on entrepreneurship policies on the existing SME policies. Without entrepreneurship, without agripreneurship, Africa will lag behind. We need entrepreneurship policies. You can reach me. I have my website. I have my YouTube. Let's dialogue. Thank you for listening.